Hello and welcome to the Saturday morning pre-lock edition of the Super Show. I'm your host, Walter Riddell, aka Dfs85, rolling solo this morning here on our pre-lock show. A lot to talk about. We are doing a show a little bit late. There's an hour to lock, so we will be getting that 10 a.m. time in the next few weeks for you guys to have a little extra time. So I'll try to be fast and efficient, if we will. So real quick, though, I do want to mention at yourfielderschoice.com, we are still running the promo, $25 a month for your first 2 months, 50% off. That gets you access to every sport we offer. NFL, college sports, esports still going on, NASCAR, MLB grind is still going on as we head towards the playoffs there. Niche sports and mega sports, NBA is right around the corner. We're going to be doing some NBA preseason stuff, Euro League. So one price fits all, gets you every single sport that you possibly could want to play. Cheat sheets for most top play articles, prize picks focused articles, wagering stuff. A one-stop shop for everything. So I definitely want you guys to check that out. If you're not in our Discord yet, the YFC Discord, I will tweet that out after the show so you guys can join us there. In the premium college room and the premium room, we post depth charts, late breaking injury news, anything that could possibly change to make it to where you can get an advantage over the rest of the field, because that late news, you guys know, is a huge edge because a lot of people set their lineups, walk off, or they don't have the benefit to be sitting on Twitter all day looking. Let us do that for you. So as I said, $25 a month, good deal. But let's jump right in here. If you guys are watching live, I appreciate that support. The right side of your YouTube chat there. If you're watching, you can ask questions, concerns, compliment my beard if you want. I'll take all compliments. But yeah, I'll get your guys' questions answered in real time. So let's jump into quarterbacks here. We're going to do the same thing that we do usually every week. My top quarterback plays, running back plays, wide receivers. I'll talk a little bit extra about some GPPs or values that is emerging, prize picks, and then a couple wagers that I like today. So let's dive in and talk quarterbacks. Firstly, I'm going to talk about Will Rogers from Mississippi State on DraftKings. He's only 7'8". Really kind of warmed up to him over the last 36 to 48 hours. It's running him as my QB1. I have a couple builds going on right now. He's definitely, probably my favorite QB as far as like safety goes. Last year, Mississippi State beat LSU 44-34. That was with KJ Costello as the QB. We know Costello ended up being very washed up, threw a lot of interceptions. But in that game, he threw for over 600 yards, 5 touchdowns against the LSU secondary. I will say the LSU defense overall is worse this year. However, they do have NFL-bound corners. So while the defense overall is worse, they do have a couple guys capable of shutting down maybe their WR1s. We'll just have to see. That means that Rodgers is going to be throwing a lot of short routes to his running backs, slot, which is what he does anyways in this air raid offense. That's what he's comfortable with. So I'm not really worried about Rodgers against those corners. This year, he's thrown for over 1,100 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, just 1 interception. That's just in 3 games already. So he's going to be heading to a big season if he can keep those mistakes down. Something he struggled with at times last year. 400 plus passing yards, multiple touchdowns seems pretty likely in this game. I think we'll be looking at a shootout here. Of course, I do have a nagging feeling that there could be some letdown spots in this game, but overall, it's a good spot to target. He's definitely a top quarterback. And then the number one chalk option of the slate is Max Duggan from TCU. Very sneaky dual threat quarterback play. He doesn't get enough credit for being a dual threat guy. He did have 19 carries in week 2 against Cal, which is huge. And he will call his own number when they're in that red zone area or the goal line area. He has 18 rushing touchdowns in 3 years in his career at TCU, so that's huge. SMU really hasn't played anyone of TCU's caliber yet. They've played some really lesser teams, I should say. So I feel like Duggan's going to, put up some points here. Austin Kendall from La Tech. He had a pretty big game of a 30 spot or more against TCU. So imagine Duggan, who's better than Kendall, could have an even bigger game. The emergence of Quentin Johnson has really helped Duggan. That's his number one option. In that week 2 game, he missed Johnson on 2 deep balls and he hammed anyway. So he could have potentially had 3 touchdowns in that game. So those two connect today on a long touchdown or 2, even though Johnson's probably out of play at his price. Duggan's going to rack it up and get a rushing touchdown or 2. So I can see why he's chalk. Definitely, if you can fit him, do so. I have him in a couple of lineups, but in my other GPPs and stuff like that, I'm looking elsewhere just to be a little different, because as long as Duggan doesn't put up a 40 plus, and he could, feel like fading him would work out okay depending on the rest of my build. Always thinking leverage terms. Malik Cunningham is 8-8 for Louisville. He's really going overlooked. Cards are small favorites. Usually Cunningham when he's going to be behind because he seems to play very aggressive when they're behind. His passing has improved the last week or two. His rushing is always going to be high level. I do think he's a major GPP play, one of the best ones at the position because people are overlooking him. He's thrown for over 700 yards so far, over 200 rushing yards. So really for me, I don't have any issues playing him. In your main or just as an alt lineup play. So those are those three kind of pay up QBs, Duggan, Cunningham, and Rodgers that I like. And the rest of the industry does too, of course. And then Max Johnson, 8-3 for LSU. If we think that Mississippi State LSU game is going to be, bananas and lots of points scored, Max Johnson is going to have to be a big part of that. The LSU running game has been horrible. They've got, guys out. They have injuries. They're going to have to rely on Kiner probably, who's a little inexperienced. That Mississippi State rush defense has been strong. Pass defense, not so much. So I could see Max Johnson throwing 40-plus times here today until his arm pretty much falls off. You see through 3 games, he has 860 yards, 11 touchdowns, and only 2 picks. So he is on pace to throw a ton of touchdowns. Has Kayshon Boutte, who's one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the country to throw to. His younger guys like Deion Smith, and Beck are kind of emerging. Last game they did well. So Boutte definitely makes anyone. I mean, we could throw touchdowns to Boutte. You just got to throw it up there and he gets it. So I definitely think Max Johnson is guy, but you want to use him in stacks. An LSU Mississippi State game stack. I wouldn't play him on his own. And then before we move on to running backs, I do think the more I've been thinking about it this morning, and this is going to be one of my plays that I would probably say, don't necessarily follow me on or use him in cash, but Logan Bonner at 5'6". I talked about him on our Supershow on Wednesday. I've said it for weeks now. If he were to get the full 4 quarters, he would be performing like an 8K guy. There's no doubt in my mind. Peasley is still going to be getting series, so it does hurt him. However, this Utah State Boise State game with a total of 70 plus, it's going to be shootout written all over it. Boise State defense isn't the Boise State defense that we're used to seeing from the past few years. They are beatable. We know Utah State is very beatable as well. We saw last week when they played Air Force. Air Force plays a slower pace, likes to run. Utah State forced them to throw, forced them to play a higher pace, and they're able to instill that tempo on other opponents. So I do feel like at home it's a big game for Utah State. They're making it a bigger game than Boise State is. Obviously, Boise State's owned them in the series. But Bonner, even if he gets 3 quarters worth of throws, is still very viable at 5'6". Going way overlooked, projecting right around 18 to 21 fantasy points. If he gets that with the opportunity for more, then I think he's definitely worth it. You saw in that game against North Dakota, he didn't have to cede any series to Peasley, and I thought, well, Bonner's finally taking that, the spot. He threw for 390 and 4 touchdowns, 35 fantasy point game. And then against Air Force, he did get hurt in that second half. Peasley had to come in, and then they started rotating again. So I feel like Bonner's going to get the first crack. If he starts off hot, throws a touchdown to Tompkins, McGriff, something like that, leads them down the field, then he should get more series. But I'm pretty confident that he's going to throw 30 times, regardless of if he gives up series to Peasley. So Bonner's kind of that sneaky play. I don't want to be too reckless and say I'm going to use him in my main lineup, but you guys know I do wacky things like that. I'm pretty big on leverage. I see no shame in using Bonner. I'm seeing people talk about running a QB2 as KJ Jefferson from Arkansas, which I'm fine with. Grosel from Boston College. Those are both guys, priced similar to Bonner with a lot of risk themselves. But if people are comfortable using them as their QB2, then there's really no reason not to at least look at Logan Bonner, who I think has sneaky upside as QB1. With that being said, I do think, and I'm team for running back, but not every slate. But you guys know that I'm one of the few in the industry that will do that. Week 1 of this season, I did run 4 running backs, worked out for me, cashed everything. When I see a slate like this with quarterbacks, Max Duggan, he's good, don't get me wrong. But when he's the top QB, that kind of makes me feel a little uneasy about the slate in terms of QBs. I do think, the top 5-6 running backs have much more upside than the top 4 to 5 quarterbacks overall in a vacuum. So with that being said, if I run an RB4 instead of a QB2, who's going to have the better chance of hitting 30 plus, Blake Corum or KJ Jefferson? So that's kind of how I think of it. So I'm on team 4 RB today, just so you guys are aware. Let's move on to running backs now. It's really kind of chalky at running back. I'll eat chalk if it's good chalk. Tyler Batty from Missouri at 6'9", my favorite RB play on the slate. He's projecting to be quite chalky. I'm just, like I said, going to eat that. Two different sites have him over 30%. We also have him over 20% on the ownership. He's going to score over 20 fantasy points. His ability to contribute in all facets of the game, whether it's rushing or passing, makes him a very, very solid, safe option. He has rushed for 345 yards on 48 carries, which is a YPC of 7.2. Yes, yes. He also has 15 receptions for 142 yards. So 6 total touchdowns in the season, 3 on the ground, 3 through the air. Second on the team in targets with 19. So there's really nobody safer than him on this slate. In my opinion, he should be priced much higher. And this BC-Missouri game is going to be sneaky high scoring, I think. Obviously, I wish Phil Jerkovich was healthy. This Boston College offense is one we've hyped quite a bit since our preseason shows with the ACC. I think there'll be points scored here. Batty should do enough damage to really pay off that 6-9 price, but expect a lot of company with him in your contest. By Bijan Robinson, same thing, 7.2K. He should be priced over 8K, so expect a lot of company with him. I'm really, like I said, placing a very high priority on running backs this week. So I'm paying up for running backs where I can. I'm playing 4 of them where I can, and Bijan definitely makes sense there. Bijan is his high floor, high upside combination are very unique when you look at the rest of your options on the slate. Even in a game where, what was it, Arkansas, where he didn't really perform all that well, he still got a ton of work, right? Almost 20 carries. He had, I think, 6 targets. Or no, I'm sorry, not 6 targets, 4 targets in that game. So, almost 20 plus touches, even in a game where he struggled against Arkansas, and he still scored 14 fantasy points. So the fact that he has a double-digit floor makes me pretty comfortable. And like I said, he's underpriced either way. So even if he were to get shut down, bust, whatever, this is one of those moments, and it's cliche to say process over results, but you play a guy like Bijan Robinson every slate, regardless of opponent, unless it's like Georgia, under 8K. Next running back for me, I do have it as Dylan Johnson. Joe Marks took a big shot the other last game. There was a defender that got taken out for targeting. Marks didn't play there. Concussion symptoms. There's not a lot of info as of last night. I'm still digging this morning to double check. But Dylan Johnson at almost 2K cheaper was a better play, even if Marks does play. Johnson at 4.6. As I mentioned, that LSU secondary is pretty strong. Their corners are NFL guys, most likely. This offense really prefers to throw shorter routes and light up the running backs. We saw when Leach was at Wazoo, Max Borghi, who's our boy, was a star. I mean, he was the double digit, carry, double digit reception guy. And he just did a lot of damage. Under Rolo now out there, he's barely getting 13 touches a game, which is really idiotic. He should be using him a lot more. So we see that regression there because of the coaching staff changes. With the Mississippi State guys, Marks has 25 targets, 25 receptions. Johnson has 19 targets, 16 receptions. But Johnson's been coming on recently, and it almost seems like pre-injury to Marks, Johnson was starting to bump him a little bit for more snaps, more carries, more playing time in general. So if, Marks were to be out, Johnson, could be looking at 10 plus targets here against LSU. They're going to want to move dink and dunk and move the ball up and down. We know Makai Polk is that guy that's going to get a lot of short yardage stuff, and then Dylan Johnson as well. So it's tough because I want to play like 5 running backs or 6 in my lineup because I like so many of them. Dylan Johnson's definitely one of those guys. He's kind of a fringe option for my main, though, because I'm going cheap at wide receiver for at least 2 of those spots, and potentially quarterback. So I need my salary for my running back. So Dylan Johnson's kind of a fringe main team play. But if you paying up for Duggan, you're paying up for Tompkins, Shakir, one of the Butte, then yes, I have no problem going Dylan Johnson in your main. Blake Corum, Hassan Haskins from Michigan. Michigan wants to run. That's what they're going to do. I really like Kurt Jones in the chat. I love you too, buddy. Resident Marshall fan. He was with me from day one, went on the show back in the day. All right. So yeah, Wolverines, this is a nice thing about this Harbaugh squad. Back in 2016, 2017, early in the season, the non-conference part of their schedule, when they would go up big, they would keep their foot on the neck, foot on the gas pedal. They were just smashing. And they're playing that way